Hi everyone, my name's Wendy Trevarthen and you're listening to Your Nurse Voice Matters. And I have Tammy Copley here today talking to us about what she's doing for nurses at the moment. Welcome, Tammy.
Oh, hi, Wendy. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Thank
That's
you for
good.
joining and taking the time out of it's evening here in Australia at the moment to talk to us about a topic that has been around for a long time and really excited to get into this for the next 20 or so minutes. So great to have you here, Tammy. Welcome.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Good to be here and good to actually get into this tough topic.
Yes. So before we go into the conversation, I'd just like to introduce you to our wider audience so that they know your background. So Tammy's been
Hmm.
a nurse and a midwife for 44 years. She started as an enrolled nurse and then studied to be a registered nurse, then a midwife, and then a child health nurse. She's worked in rural, remote, regional, and city areas in hospitals, community, Indigenous community controlled organisations, NGOs, agency, and the university sector. She has had many roles, including nurse unit manager, state board of a union for 9 years, volunteer, and justice of the peace. Tammy founded the Nurses and Midwives Against Bullying Australia over 5 years ago, and that's the topic that we'd like to talk about today. So, Tammy, thank you for that, for your bio, and I can see that you've had an extensive area of work around a lot of areas within nursing and a lot of roles within nursing, which is really important when you're actually taking on such a hot topic as bullying. Can I ask, what was your introduction to this? What kind of was your pivot point that you felt you had to bring this to the forefront for yourself?
Yeah, sure. Um, I had experienced bits of bullying during my career, but not sustained and not um, anything like we're seeing today. Um, I was attending a nurse and midwife rally in a city area, and a nurse approached me because of my position and started to speak to me about bullying. And I said to her, "Look, you're not the first person. I've had so many people talking to me about this topic, and I know that it's real, and we need to be doing something about it." So I put heaps of thought into it, and there were lots of reasons not to start the group, certainly work wise, union wise, and otherwise. Then one day I just decided, well, there are so many nurses and midwives coming to me and talking to me about it. And I was just starting to experience some quite sustained bullying myself at that point in time that I'd never experienced in my career before. So it was with that I decided, well, hey, let's do something, because I am a senior nurse and midwife, and I was involved in the union movement, and I'm a person who believes in social justice. So I thought, why not? So
Mm.
with that, the group was born.
Nice. So I think in order to understand what we're talking about, we probably need to have some definitions about what bullying actually is. Can you talk to us a little bit about, because there's so many different scenarios, but I'm sure that there are some key things that need to happen to actually identify yourself as being bullied. What would they be?
Mm.
Mm.
So I guess if we look at what is bullying, it's also what isn't bullying as well. Bullying is one of those topics where people either believe you or they don't. And if someone's experiencing something different to you in the workplace, they may just wonder, what is really going on here. So bullying by definition, and I'm not going to quote the entire definition or anything like that, but
Mm.
essentially it is when an individual or a group of people are really facing a lot of persecution in the workplace. And I'm going to talk workplace because that's what we're looking at. It can be schools, it can be all kinds of places, family units, etc. But bullying is sustained and repeated negative treatment of other people that makes them feel unsafe, and that is under no means, by no means is it light. It's very serious effect on people. I don't have the statistics right in front of me today, but anyone who joins our group will be able to see what those statistics are. But very, very high rates of mental health conditions, very high rates of physical injury or physical ailments as a result. And we also know that the suicide rates are huge, let alone the depression, the anxiety, the PTSD. All of these things are really major issues. And the last thing we want nurses and midwives to do is to be taking their own lives as a result.
Mm.
A big thing that it also impacts on is people's ability to work in the workplace, to sustain their employment. A lot of people are pushed out of their workplaces, and we call this constructive dismissal. In other words, they're not sacked, but they also haven't left of their own accord. Working in the particular workplace has become untenable because of what's happening. Now, I did say about physical ailments, but I also said about physical injury. And we've had many nurses and midwives who have sustained physical injuries by being slapped, choked. They've been caused to trip over things. One nurse had a bookcase pushed on her. There's been a lot of different things. We've had people that have been locked in rooms on their own. They've been spat on. All kinds of things have happened as far as physical injury goes. Physical ailments can be anything from strokes and CVAs or CVAs, whatever you want to call them. It could be things like heart attacks. It could be indigestion. The list of physical ailments goes on that we know that are increased as a result of bullying. One thing that's particularly disturbing, and I'm going to put a warning on this one, that it can be quite distressing, and that if someone is distressed by hearing this, certainly reach out to a counsellor, call Lifeline, Beyond Blue, or any kind of place for support. We have had a number of nurses and midwives who have been sexually assaulted in the workplace or because of the workplace. Now, if we get physical injury or we get sexual abuse, then that now is no longer bullying. It is a criminal matter that should be reported to the police. We have one nurse at the moment who is pursuing legal action, and that's before the courts. And we've had others who have been too scared to approach their employer, the police, or anybody else. So any of those things, and false imprisonment, being locked in rooms, injury by a patient, injury by somebody else, can actually be reported as criminal matters. Other things that are less serious but still have significant impact can be exclusion, isolation, gossip, bad-mouthing people, like putting them down. Really, it's, if you look at the coercive control laws, it's very similar to domestic violence. So all of those things and more can constitute bullying. Things not allowing you to progress in the workplace even though you have the skills, stopping opportunities, withholding information, any number of things, false complaints. So a lot of those things constitute bullying.
So there's a lot there to think about. You've really kind of put all of the categories there for the viewers or the listeners here. And I guess it's sometimes because I've been in a situation myself, and for me, you're so much in it that sometimes you aren't actually aware that that's actually happening to you until something pivotal happens, which may not be significant. But when you step away and you look at it, you go, oh my goodness, there was a bit of a pattern there. So these poor nurses that are probably in a situation that is not physically serious, or it's the subtle, you mentioned coercive control, that's come up
Mm-hmm.
in the news in the last, couple of years, that the laws have changed a little bit around that, or significantly around that across all areas. But what are some of the things that the nurse may feel in themselves that something's not quite right?
Yeah, so you're right that it can be subtle. It can also be not quite so subtle, but you're really not picking up on it. You're really not realizing what it is. And that can be quite common in situations of where we call it mobbing, or we might call it flying monkeys. So anyone who's watched The Wizard of Oz, the flying monkeys went out and did the bidding for the Wicked Witch. And so the Wicked Witch in this situation is the bully, and the bullies don't like to get their hands dirty. So they'll often have a mob, or they'll recruit people around them so that they do the dirty work for the bully. Sometimes bullies just do it themselves. They don't care about having a mob. But this little mob is basically their little army who goes after one person. And I love to encourage nurses and midwives by saying, if that many people had to get together to bring you down, they really thought you were powerful. And it doesn't matter whether it's one person or whether it's a mob of people and you're copying it from everybody. There can be feelings where you start to feel insecure. You might start to doubt yourself. You might start second guessing everything. You lose your confidence and you're not prepared to make a decision. What if they're right? What if I'm wrong? Am I actually going crazy? Or are these things that they're saying, these rumors they're spreading, I wonder, could they actually be true? It could be that you are starting to think about leaving the workplace. And for some people, that's definitely the best opportunity or the best thing to do. But there's all of these feelings. You don't feel safe. You're sitting in your car before or after work crying. You're not wanting to go to work anymore. You feel anxiety increasing. You're starting to feel depressed. Or if you already have a mental health condition, and there's nothing wrong with having a mental health condition, it's no worse than having a broken leg or a thyroid issue, etc. You might find a decline in your mental health. If you've never had a mental health condition, you're starting to feel anxious or getting a panic disorder, feel yourself being depressed, lack of energy, lack of motivation, all of these things, and thinking, but I know I didn't do anything wrong, and just feeling uncertain, not wanting to trust anybody, even yourself.
Yeah, that lack of self-confidence for me was the
Mm,
indicator that something wasn't quite right. Then you mentioned second guessing, double checking everything, making
yeah.
sure everything, you're looking over your shoulder, just that sort
Mm-hmm.
of, I'm going to use the word paranoia, but
Yeah,
having
yeah,
that sense that, somebody was watching, yeah,
yeah.
etc. So I guess, if you're going through, one of the nurses listening is going through a scenario like that, what are some of the steps that they should take initially when they
Yeah.
recognize that something's not quite right?
Definitely. So reach out as soon as you possibly can to someone you trust, and preferably not in your workplace, because your workplace is not meant to be your friend place, if that makes sense. So, not everyone that you perceive a friend in the workplace is actually your true friend. And the more that you reveal about yourself in the workplace, the more vulnerable it makes you. I had very, very wise counsel when I was a very young nurse, and we had one of the sisters say, keep work at work and keep home at home. And I've never seen that be more important than in this current day. Only share minimal things at work so that you're still friendly, you're still approachable, you're still sharing things, but don't go into the depths of anything. Don't share your deepest, darkest secrets, even with someone that you really think you can trust, because I've spoken to way too many who have shared really personal things at work. They think they can trust these people, they think they're their friends, and then they find all of their personal information has been just shared around, or that personal information has been used against them and it shouldn't have been. There's no purpose to use it against them, but just the same, things get twisted.
Mhm.
So reach out. I don't mind if it's your friend or your family member, a nurse who's not working with you, because we all know nurses in other places, whether it's Lifeline, Beyond Blue, the nurse midwife support number, any of those numbers. Some people like to use the EAP or EAS service that's connected to work. Other people don't, because they don't trust them. So it's up to you, but somewhere that you are absolutely comfortable. And the one big thing that I would say is to keep a very, very detailed diary, because your diary, even though it's there for evidence for later, can actually be really helpful, because it's a way of reflection and diarising and talking to a journal when you might not be able to talk to anybody else.
Mm.
So it holds a bit of a double-edged sword there for you, that it's not necessarily your counselor, but a way of getting feelings out. And it's also a way to document what's happening.
Mm.
So be thorough. Where was I? Who was I with? Date, time. What was the conversation about? Any witnesses? How did it make you feel? All of those kinds of things.
Mm. Really interesting because, as you know, I'm a book strategist, so I help new authors with their book ideas, and that's one of the things with people that have been through a trauma. A lot of the psychologists are actually recommending that you do journal, and it can be a quite
Mm,
cathartic process, and it's like a weight is lifted off your shoulders once you actually do that activity. And
yes.
going through
Yeah.
those emotions. And you're exactly right. Like if you're writing down those thoughts and feelings, you may not recognize yourself 2 weeks later when you go back to read those notes that yes, that was
Mm,
actually a real thing that happened to me. So
yeah.
really useful advice. So once you mentioned, take steps to leave, but is there anything, if you feel that there is something in the workplace that you're wanting to pursue, you love this area that you're working in and you want to
Mm,
try and make an amends. Is there any avenue in your workplace that you could pursue? Like you mentioned, it depends on who the perpetrators are, of course,
mm.
but if if there is someone in the workplace, how would they make steps to try and make amends, to bring it to light or come to a resolution because that is the area that they actually want to stay in?
Yeah, sure.
Mm,
Look, it can be really, really hard to bring it up in your workplace. And I guess it really depends on who's in management. Now, we know that managers and leaders are very, very different. Not everyone who's a manager is a leader. Not everyone who is a leader is a manager, but you're lucky if you get both in the one person. So, management is about basically managing people and money and making sure they work to the organization's ideals. Leaders are people who are able to bring people up alongside, share a vision, help people, achieve a purpose, move on, etc. So leaders are really people you look up to and people that can help you grow. And as I said, if you can get the two in one, that's great. Some workplaces are better than others, and I had sustained horrible bullying. I remained in my workplace, and that was because I went, yeah, no, you're not going to win. And I was just talking to someone today about that experience, and
mm,
I'm in a field I absolutely love. And that has worked for me, but has also been difficult. Like, I'm not going to say it was easy by any stretch, and I'm not saying it doesn't still affect me today because it does. Um, but sometimes staying in that field is the best thing because that's where your passion is. But it might even be recognizing that I can't stay in this workplace, but I can take those skills to another workplace.
mm,
That's particularly hard, though, for people working in rural and remote communities because there might only be one hospital for hours and you can't necessarily move between workplaces. Sometimes it might actually be thinking, okay, so where else could I transfer those skills to? Like maybe you're an amazing medical nurse, you just love medical nursing, or you just love ED or something. Maybe you could transfer from ED to ICU or medical to ICU. Like have a look where else in your area, or is there a community job? Sometimes it's not about staying, sometimes it's about leaving. But certainly setting healthy boundaries in your workplace about what you will and won't tolerate, and maybe talking to people up front. And it might be that someone said something really nasty, and you might say to them, that sounded very nasty. Is that how you intended that to sound? Or, you know, I really deserve respect. I give you respect. Would you please speak to me respectfully too? And it's about giving people praise when you see it, even those people who are nasty to you, that just giving them some praise, because sometimes that's what they need too, because they're down in a ditch and maybe they do or don't mean to bully you. But if they don't, it might be encouraging and it helps them to turn around. But any kind of those strategies, and there are others, but it might be about talking to a higher up if you can trust them. And if it's, say, your num and your num or your mum, your midwifery unit manager, isn't being very receptive, could you go to the person above them? Is there someone else in the organisation that you could talk to with regards to getting the message across to these people? Or is there some other way, like introducing something into your workplace that can help your workplace to improve morale and help to encourage each other. There are lots of things we can do in the workplace even to improve culture. Sometimes that doesn't work. It's just simply that person or those people, and you need to get out.
Mm. And yeah, sometimes. And I think the question there is too, is actually recognizing the skills that you have in that area. And they may not just be the
Mm.
clinical skills, it's also you mentioned leadership. I like the term fellowship. It's someone that you
Yes,
want to
yes,
follow,
yeah,
someone that you want to aspire to, or be that person that you want to aspire other people.
yeah.
So recognizing those skills within yourself and recognizing that they are of value somewhere else.
Oh,
That
exactly. Yeah.
someone will actually pick up the value that you do offer and that you do give to your community, to your patients, and to your colleagues.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. So, if we hear about, people that leave the workplace, and what are some of the entitlements that they have if they no longer can work? If someone is that affected by what's gone on and they do need to take a period of leave, what are some of the support that is there for them? What's the likely timeline, recovery, rehab, introduction? Can you give us an overview of what that looks like?
Yeah, so for a start, I would be trying to find a trauma informed therapist, whether that's a social worker, a counselor, or someone. I usually recommend clinical psychologists because with the clinical psychologist, they can actually give you a diagnosis as well. And then out of that diagnosis, you might, in the worst case scenarios, if you really can never return to nursing or midwifery, you could apply for your TPD. So that's your total and permanent disablement. That's through your super. So that's the worst case scenario. But tracking back from there, if you need to take leave, you can take your annual leave, you can take your sick leave. If you've got long service leave there, you can also take that at full pay or you can take that at half pay. Now, depending on the state and territory in which you live, it might also be something like extenuating circumstances leave, or and I know that in Queensland you can apply for that through the Director General, but then again, you've got to be upfront about what's happening, and they really don't like giving leave for extenuating circumstances. So you can have a look at those issues. Then, of course, there's your income protection insurance through your superannuation as well. That can give you up to 2 years leave. But before you take that, it's important to check with your super fund because depending on what kind of superannuation you've got, you will have 1 month or in most cases, 3 months with no pay before you can actually get a payment.
Mm.
So taking your annual leave, your sick leave, your long service leave, you pretty much need to exhaust your other leave before you can take that. And when you take that 2 years of leave, like you're not planning on taking 2 years because you want to get back to the workforce if you can, but that decreases in payment as you go on. So you might start getting 87, 85%, then you might be down to 75%, 50%, 25% of your wage before you run out of super. So you're going to be on a decreasing payment the longer you're off. The other thing you can look at is workers' compensation in the state and territory that you're in. Psychological damage, though, is extremely hard to prove. And New South Wales at the moment are having a huge look at their super because they want to try and decrease the psychological hardship payments through work cover. It's going to be harder to claim psychological damage. Now, a lot of that is around the fact that 1 in 3 people or thereabouts end up with a mental health condition at some point in their lives anyway. But we know that psychological hazards at work are more likely to result in PTSD.
Mm.
And there's a growing number of people with PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. So they're your main reasons. And then, of course, worst case scenario is there's leave without pay.
Mm. Yes. And I mean, it sounds really like a big tunnel that people have to go through to actually get to that point and achieve.
Mm,
And I guess being in, like you've been in middle management, I've been in middle
mm,
management as well. I guess some of the things that you think about as a middle manager is if this is actually happening to one of your staff, like me, I wanted to support that staff member. I wanted to keep them in the area if I could and try and navigate your way around those with some solutions and putting something into the workplace, as you said, to increase the culture. But as
Mm,
a middle manager, from an organisational viewpoint, you actually realise that that person is a valuable staff member. And
yes.
you were talking before we came on about some of the, people don't recognise how much it actually costs the organisation for that person to move on. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I was the NUM, I always said to people, I have an open door policy. And on top of that, I don't care who's bullying you. I don't care if it's the director of nursing, because in those days that was as high as you went. But I don't care if it's the CEO of the hospital. I don't care if it's the janitor. I don't care if it's the person in the kitchen. It didn't matter who it was. I said, if you're being bullied, you come and let me know, because I definitely have a zero tolerance to that. And I held my word to that. And I still think we should be the same. We've put the signs up all over healthcare places and lots of other places these days: zero tolerance to abuse. Do not abuse our staff. But when it comes to abusing staff, it's different. It seems to be swept under the carpet and people get away with it. So in nursing and midwifery, the biggest turnover is not actually what we're paid. It's not the conditions per se that we work in, such as maternity leave and stuff. I mean, yes, we like that. Yes, we want that. Yes, we need it and deserve it. But one of the biggest reasons of nurses and midwives leaving is toxic culture. And that starts with your managers. Now, the career structure in nursing has had a lot to do with that. The career structure in midwifery has had a lot to do with that, where it's now very, very competitive. So we know that for every nurse or midwife who leaves, and we know that we're leaving en masse, and I predicted this years ago and said to the union, we are hemorrhaging nurses and midwives. And I got an extremely snarly comment back at me saying, no, we're not. That's ridiculous. Well, now my words are being used that we are hemorrhaging nurses and midwives. We've got a mass exodus. And a lot of it is the toxic culture. Every time a nurse or midwife leaves, we have to recruit a new one, train them up, give them supernumerary days, etc., etc. We're trying to fill their space with casuals and agency and whoever else. And that can cost up to 1 to 2 times the wage of that nurse or midwife simply to replace them. So, let alone all the other costs around it. And then we're looking at the health burden on the health dollar, because the nurse who's been bullied out is using a massive amount of health funding now, whether it's public or private, and spending a lot of that. And when we look at that, it's not just the cost that way, it's also the cost to the nurse and midwife, because their wages are dropping and it affects them, their families, their colleagues, it affects their partners. It's a ripple effect everywhere, and it's a very huge financial cost. If you were to add up the cost for just one person, and you looked at their replacement at work, their family, their everything, their health costs, it'd be a staggering number, but definitely 1 to 2 times more. And America has even said that it costs even more than that.
Mm. It's staggering to think about.
Mm,
We need to look after our nurses. We train them really well in the universities now, and nurture them when they've finished their university studies so that they feel well supported in their workplaces, that they feel confident in what they're doing, and that this scenario is minimized. That's what we should all be striving for, 100%.
mm,
So Tammy,
yeah.
I've learned a lot just by talking to you for these last 25 minutes. I'm sure our audience have really maybe pictured themselves in some of the situations that we've been talking about today, and we hope that we've imparted some advice on how they could manage, how they can see, how they can be more educated around bullying in the workplace. If you were to give our nurses out there one tip, one golden tip, what would it be?
Okay, so we say that we have a shortage of nurses and midwives. Yeah, we do, but it's not as bad as we think. We have a shortage of nurses and midwives prepared to tolerate the BS that is happening in our workplaces with the toxic culture. So, what I want to say to you is if you are being bullied, if you have been bullied, if you think you're being bullied, I want you to believe in yourself. Don't listen to the doubters. Don't listen to the gaslighting. Don't listen to all the issues that are coming up. Believe and trust in yourself.
Fantastic. What a great piece of advice for nurses out there. And indeed, like the non-nurses that are listening to this too, I'm sure that there is some parallels there in their workplaces as
Oh, yeah.
well. Yeah. So, Tammy, thank you so much for taking time out this evening to talk to us on our podcast. How can any nurses reach out to you? And I'll put this in the podcast brief as well. What's the best
Yep.
way? Email
Yep.
or?
Yeah, so probably the best way is getting on to join our page, first of all, Nurses and Midwives Against Bullying Australia. We have a main page that we don't put a lot on. That's got our white logo, but the one with the blue logo, Nurses and Midwives Against Bullying Australia, that's our support group. And you can certainly message me through there. That is the best way. I do have a Twitter page that I never use anymore and a LinkedIn page, which I rarely get on. I've just got so many other things that I focus on in my personal and professional life. But certainly the page is definitely the best way.
The best avenue to contact you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Great. Thank you again, Tammy, for being here. And yeah, any last words?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, we could talk forever about bullying. We
Yes.
could do a series on it. There's
Yes.
so much information. But there are positives that come out of bullying, believe it or not. And if you have a look on our group, you'll see that there are definitely positives that can come out of it amongst all the negatives.
Mm.
And, you know, we are just here to support each other and hope that you'll come and join us.
Maybe we could do a part B later
Oh,
on in the
yes.
year. Yeah, on the positives. That would be really wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Tammy. I'll close off now. You've been listening to Your Nurse Voice Matters. If you or any of your friends, people that you know, have got a story to share to other nurses, feel free to reach out to me. The contacts will be on the podcast brief for you. So that's bye for me from Your Nurse Matters.